Today's subwoofer alignment is a common problem among sound systems. Looking at subwoofer alignment from the standpoint of an acoustical prediction program is often a useful tool. Here we have our typical dual 18-inch subwoofer with its own independent DSP, as well as a full range loudspeaker or a monopole loudspeaker located 15 feet above our dual 18-inch subwoofer. Again, this monopole has its own separate DSP, and then we have a microphone out 10 feet away from this array. Now in our prediction program, we could view phase, magnitude, and the ETC. So if I just do some quick window management, okay, and what we see here is the impulse response of our highs, our lows, and the magnitude response. Now here we see an apparent comb filter ripple, and that's due to a physical placement that I've put in the prediction program. It's very common for our subwoofers to be located behind our full range loudspeakers. So I've gone ahead and added that in. Now, but if you look here, there's a comb filter, but it's really not that bad. The thing is, we haven't added any electrical filters into our sound system yet. So let's go ahead and add those in now. So I'll add in a third order 18 dB Butterworth, and for our full range I'll add, let's go ahead and just make it an even 24 dB Linkwitz Riley. Okay, so here's our response. And when people are looking at subwoofer alignment, what they're talking about is the region where the two loudspeakers overlap, right around in here. Oops. Okay. So there's our electrical and acoustical crossover. Now to fix this, what we can do is use the phase trace, and I'll go ahead and zoom in on that area as well. Okay, and we can start adding delay to our top loudspeaker to align with our subwoofer loudspeaker. Now to use the phase trace, what we need to understand is what we're actually trying to do. We're trying to get this trace to line up on top of this trace. This is our subwoofer, this is our top loudspeaker. So to do that, we'll open up our DSP and we'll start adding delay. Now while we're doing this, we can see the change in the magnitude response as well. I think I have enough room for the phase response and the impulse response. So let's start adding some delay. And you see this area, this void is starting to close in now. Going a little more. Right now we're at 2 milliseconds, so 2 feet. Keep going a little more. I think that's going to be it right there. If I rotate the phase display, you get a little better look at it. So right here it's overlapping pretty good, and on each side it has pretty much about the same amount of void, of summation as well. Now one thing to think about is how do you get this slope to line perfectly on top of that? Well, to get it to line perfectly on top of that, you need to play around with different crossover filters and different crossover shapes. Okay, and if you see one thing that kind of starts matching, sounds about right, looks about right. Of course our 18 dB Butterworth, it fits up with it just fine, but has less, doesn't need as much delay. That aligns up over a larger region. So there's your subwoofer alignment area. Okay, so that's with alignment at 2 milliseconds. That's without 6 dB. If we look in the magnitude response, we can can see this as well. So there's 6 dB, and our 6 dB has a 90 degrees phase shift. It starts at 0, ends up at 90 degrees. If we look at our 12 dB crossover, 12 dB in the magnitude, has 180 degrees for the phase response. That's what's known as a two-pole filter. Okay, so if a 6 dB has one pole, 12 dB has two pole, that means that for every pole filter we use requires 90 degrees of phase shift. So the magnitude, the benefit is a crossover filter, but what you have to pay is the sacrifice is the phase response. So if we keep adding poles, different orders, now we can also invert the response and see before and after in the phase response. The time domain is still in alignment, but the phase response is not. Now, to further look at this, one thing we want to discuss is the impulse response. Depending on the type of music, you may or may want to do an impulse response alignment, meaning that this alignment aligns perfectly with the impulse of the low frequency drivers. That's an oral process. Depending on the music that you're using, you may or may not want to do that. Another thing we want to look at is what's actually causing most of that delay. So I'll insert a filter set. I'll put it at 1 kilohertz. Make this a 6 dB filter. And we'll copy this. Okay. So now if we look at the phase response, we have our 6 dB filter. Now this is what's called a single pole filter. This pole has a roll-off of, now we have 270 degrees. This is a third order, 18 dB. 3 times 90, 270. Okay. We'll go to a fourth order, 4 times 90, 360 degrees, and so on and so forth. Go to 5 poles. Go to 6 poles. And as you start here, you start adding, actually we started here, more and more and more and more and more and more delay. But we got a sharper and sharper knee. So there's one fault for your delay in your subwoofer library. You know, if you use, say, a very steep 48 dB per octave filter, you're going to get a lot of delay for doing that. Okay. Now another thing we can look at is another prediction tool called Race. And Race is kind of interesting. It allows you to throw in your loudspeakers, put them wherever you want. And if you notice up here we have a magnitude response. The listener's head is our microphone. You can go to the front, to the back. Now one problem is where do you place your microphone when you do subwoofer alignment? And that's a whole completely different discussion, but I just wanted to point out Race as another acoustical prediction tool that you can do everything that I just showed you. You can download that for free. You can also look at the phase response as well, and the phase response of the individual band passes. Okay, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed.